Before a nation watched him rise, before the world called him a leader, he was simply a man in love with a woman whose silence now echoed louder than betrayal. She was not his weakness, but his mirror, fierce, principled, and unflinching in the face of truth. Yet in a world where power casts long shadows, even love must bend or break. What do you do when the person you trust most becomes the liability your country cannot afford? What remains when duty tears apart the only soul who ever truly saw you? This is not just a moment of governance or strategy. It is the quiet tragedy of choosing country over companionship and the cost of protecting a nation with a fractured heart. The sun rose quietly over the city of Ouagadougou, spilling gold over the rooftops of a nation in flux. President Ibrahim Traoré stood by the window of his modest office at the presidential palace. The room was silent save for the occasional chirp of birds and the distant sounds of a waking city, but his mind was far from calm. On the desk in front of him was a sealed folder stamped with red and labeled, "Confidential, eyes only." He opened it slowly, already dreading its contents. Inside was a dossier compiled by Burkina Faso's internal intelligence agency. It detailed weeks of surveillance, intercepted calls, encrypted messages, and suspicious financial activity. But what truly chilled him wasn't the tactics or the threat. It was the name at the center of it all: Assad Zango, his wife. They met, nearly a decade ago, before power, before politics. Ibrahim was a young military officer committed to his homeland and disillusioned by corruption. Issata was a journalist born in Bobo Dioulasso, passionate about justice and driven by stories that mattered. They met at a town hall meeting in Kadougou. She asked him a pointed question about military accountability. He answered with honesty, and that honesty turned into conversation, then companionship, and eventually love. In those early days, they would walk together through dusty streets, exchanging ideas, discussing politics, laughing at childhood stories. She had challenged him intellectually in ways no one else had. She had always stood by him through his decision to reject foreign meddling, through the nights spent hiding in safe houses during coups and uprisings, through the dangerous transition to leadership. Her courage, wit, and resilience became as much a part of his political journey as his own convictions. Until now. The file claimed that Issata had been contacted by operatives of a foreign intelligence group operating under diplomatic cover. The objective? Gain insight into the president's military strategies, resource negotiations, and his inner circle. They didn't offer money. They offered something far more sinister: protection for her extended family living in Europe. If she didn't cooperate, there would be consequences. Tor closed the file and leaned back, his eyes heavy, his heart heavier. The betrayal wasn't simple. It wasn't clean. It was soaked in gray areas, wrapped in moral ambiguity. How do you confront the person you trust most in the world with something like this? That evening, the presidential residence was quieter than usual. Issata sat in their reading room, curled up with a book, one of Maria Maba's novels, her favorite. The air between them had changed over the past week. There had been silences longer than usual, touches that lingered with uncertainty. Ibrahim walked in slowly and sat beside her. He didn't speak at first. She looked up, sensing the gravity in his expression. "Issata," he said quietly, "I read the file." She froze. After a long silence, she put the book down. "They threatened my brother, my aunt, and Leon. I didn't know what else to do. I thought I could mislead them, buy time, but they kept pushing." Her voice cracked, her composure breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you, Ibrahim. I thought I could protect them and still protect you." His hand trembled as he reached for hers. He didn't let go. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence held them, suspended in heartbreak. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder. In the days that followed, the president retreated into a fog of decision-making. How could he protect the integrity of the nation and still honor the woman who had been his partner in every sense? He met with close advisors sworn to secrecy. Opinions were divided, One general said firmly, "We cannot afford to show leniency. If our enemies see weakness, they will exploit it." Another whispered, "She was coerced, that matters. She's not the traitor here." Even his old mentor, Colonel Yakuba, weighed in. "Leadership will test every inch of your soul. But remember, son, justice without mercy is just another form of tyranny." But in the end, no one could make the decision for him. Under the shade of a large baobab tree in the palace gardens, Izada waited. She wore a simple white dress, the kind she wore when they first met. Her hair was tied back, her posture composed, but her eyes carried the storm within. Ibrahim approached alone. "I can't keep you here," he said. "Not because I don't trust your heart, but because I can't risk what others might do because of you." She nodded, tears welling but refusing to fall. "You don't have to explain. I know what you have to do." He handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a diplomatic exit permit, safe passage, and instructions for a new identity abroad. Her departure would be quiet, dignified, and permanent. That evening, they shared a final meal together. No guards, no staff, just the two of them as they had been years before. They laughed, cried, remembered. As she left, she turned one last time. "I hope history remembers you kindly, and I hope it remembers us." That week, President Traoré addressed the nation from the steps of the presidential palace. Leadership is often spoken of in terms of strength and strategy, but true leadership is knowing when your heart must make room for your duty. He didn't mention Izada by name, but the subtext was clear. International media speculated wildly. Some praised his sacrifice, others accused him of political ruthlessness. But within Burkina Faso, many understood the complexity. In villages and cities, people spoke quietly of the burden of power and the lonely roads it sometimes demands. Izada settled in a small town in Sahel near the border. She kept a low profile, writing under a pseudonym, contributing to human rights publications. Her work focused on political prisoners, refugee stories, and press freedom. She never gave interviews, never published a memoir, but in her private journal she wrote, "There is a kind of love that does not need to be visible to be real. I loved a man who carried a nation on his back, and sometimes loving him meant getting out of the way." President Traoré threw himself into reform. He expanded education in rural areas, invested in green energy, and rooted out corrupt networks. His administration passed a historic Land Reform Act that redistributed idle land to smallholder farmers. He built new alliances with African nations, reducing reliance on former colonial powers. During a tour in the Sahel region, he visited a solar-powered school. A little girl named Amira gave him a drawing. "This is you," she said, pointing to a stick figure holding hands with children. "You protect us." He smiled, tears brimming, reminded of what he had chosen to protect. Months later, Traoré was invited to speak at an African Union summit. His speech, titled "The Burden of Integrity," was met with a standing ovation. "Nations are not built by perfect men," he said. "They are built by those willing to make imperfect choices for the greater good." On the first anniversary of Izada's departure, 2 letters crossed paths in the mail. One from Izada, sent with a simple message. "Even oceans away, I believe in the future you're building." And one from Ibrahim, sent to her new address. "I still see you in every decision I make. You are no longer beside me, but you are still with me. Always." In a world where leaders are often judged by victories or failures, perhaps the truest measure is in what they're willing to lose for the sake of what they must protect. This is not just the story of a president. It is the story of love, sacrifice, and the quiet courage of choosing duty over desire.